Yeah, it's fine, Marco. I think you can start.
Okay. So, good evening. Probably you are from some area of Europe, most of you from Netherlands. My name is Marco Russo. I'm going to change the screen now. This is the introductory slide for the series of events about external tools for Power BI. You see my other colleagues that will present different tools. And this evening we talk about DAX Studio. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me just start with this. So I have in my screen, I have just a couple of slides to introduce the topic, and then we will spend most of the time showing demos. So I'm open to your questions, so feel free at any time to ask your questions in the chat window, and the other people in the other host will break me and will ask the questions at the right time. So, DAX Studio. The idea in 1 hour, I want to show you the main features of DAX Studio. My name is Marco Russo. I work at SQL BI. We write books, we teach courses, and we wrote a small part of DAX Studio. I personally wrote the code for a few windows, for example, for the analysis of the performances, storage engine, formula engine, query plan, and so on. But DAX Studio, 95% of DAX Studio is written and maintained by Darren Gospel, who is an MVP, a Microsoft MVP, who lives in Melbourne, Australia. And so thanks to him, we have this great tool that help me every day to do my job, but help many people. We see the number of downloads is amazing. So what is this tool, DAX Studio? DAX Studio, first of all, is free, is open source, and is a tool that helps you writing DAX code, creating DAX queries, creating DAX expression, and investigating on performance about DAX formulas that may not work so well. So these are the main features of DAX Studio. So if you're new to Power BI and you don't have a former experience of relational databases, SQL Server, it's hard to explain what DAX Studio does. But if you have a SQL Server background, DAX Studio is similar to what SQL Server Management Studio is for SQL Server, without any feature for the database administrator, but in terms of running a query, looking at the result, and analyzing the performance with the profiler, this is what DAX Studio does for Power BI for analysis services, similar to what SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS, does for SQL Server. DAX Studio started many years ago. It started years before we had Power BI. So Power BI has been introduced in 2015, and DAX Studio as a project started in 2012, 2013. The first version of analysis services, we felt the need of a tool like SQL Server Management Studio. So we started writing the code. Actually, Darren started, I helped him at the beginning, and then I helped him in a few parts. But as I said, if we measure the time spent on this tool, it's just maybe 5%. If I'm already taking too much merit for that. You can download it for free. You can run it, and you can run it also if you are not an administrator. You have to go in this web page that I'm opening now, and here you can download the tool. Now, when you download the tool here, you have an installer, but you see here there is another link to install the portable version. If you use Windows and you are not an administrator for your desktop, for your laptop, because you have a company laptop or a company desktop and you are not an administrator, you can download the portable version, which is basically a folder that you can unzip and you can run DAX Studio from there. It just works, even though in that case you will not have, well, now for Power BI Desktop it works. Yeah, it pretty much works. We will not have only one feature that I will explain. The first feature that I will show you is the integration with Power BI. So let's start from a Power BI model. Actually, DAX Studio can work also with analysis services, but I know that most of the users today use Power BI, and it's easy to translate what I show to analysis services. So when I have a Power BI model open, a Power BI model that has tables, that has relationships and so on, what can I do? You see here this external tools ribbon. This external tools ribbon appears if and only if you install DAX Studio with the installer, which requires administrative permission. And when you do that, and you see I also installed other external tools, but the icon of DAX Studio appears because it has been installed, DAX Studio has been installed using a version from July or later. I suggest you to install the latest version, of course. Now, what happens when I click the icon of DAX Studio? DAX Studio is open. And this is the only feature that you will not have if you install DAX Studio using a portable version. And DAX Studio has this, a number of tools that I'm going to show you one by one. But before doing that, let me just do a very, very simple demo here. What we have here on the left is the metadata pane, where we see, let me show you this side by side, we see a list of tables that correspond to the list of tables we have here. And if I drill down, for example, in sales, you see that I have columns, I have measures, just as I have columns and measures here, right? So the graphic could be different, but basically we are navigating through the list of objects we have in the model, tables, measures, columns. And the main feature of DAX Studio is that we can write here a DAX query, and we can execute this DAX query. How do we write a DAX query? The easiest way is writing evaluate followed by the name of a table, like for example, product. You see that I have a small intelligence. The intelligence we have today in DAX Studio is not so advanced as the intelligence we have in Power BI. I will talk about this later. And I can click run, and I can see the result of the query. Now, when you see that I enlarge the font, I'm pressing Control on the keyboard, and I'm moving the mouse wheel so that I increase or decrease the font. This is a feature we introduced for doing the demo in the sessions. You can use it on any window. So if you run a demo, a presentation, and you don't have other techniques to zoom the area, this is a way. Here we have the content of the table. We can see the result of the content of the table. For those of you that know SQL, what I did is like writing select star from table on SQL Server. It's similar, but I'm querying the model I have here in Power BI Desktop. Now, what happens? So let me go back 1 second. Imagine we don't have this integration. We don't have the external tools with DAX Studio, or you don't have Power BI at all. What can you do? Well, you can run DAX Studio from your folder. So you download DAX Studio and you open DAX Studio, doing double click on the icon of DAX Studio in the folder you unzip. And then you see that you have a connect dialog box that asks you where you want to connect. If you have a Power BI file open, you will see the name of the window of that file here. I currently have 2 Power BI desktop files open, and I can choose which of these 2 files I want to connect to. So for example, I want to connect to Contoso, which is the same file I connected before. And I click connect, and I see exactly the same user experience. So the only integration we have between Power BI Desktop and DAX Studio is that when you click on this button, Power BI Desktop runs a new window with DAX Studio already connected to Power BI. This is the only difference. Everything else is the same. And you can also connect to analysis services. You can choose here the name of the server, or Power Pivot, a Power Pivot data model. As you see, this is disabled because I'm not running DAX Studio from within Excel. The this feature, Power Pivot, requires you to install DAX Studio as an administrator of the machine. When you do that, in Excel, you will see an icon to run DAX Studio. And when you click on that button and you have a Power Pivot model, you will see this option enabled. So I will continue just showing you DAX Studio connected to Power BI, but all the features we are going to see are available in all these other tools, Analysis Services and Power Pivot. So what can we do with DAX Studio? As I said, the first thing is that, okay, we can write DAX code, which means that we have to know DAX. So what if we don't know DAX at all? Well, when you run report here in Power BI, every visual element of the page is actually generating one or more DAX queries to populate the content of the visual. And if I run the performance analyzer here, I click start recording, and for example, I refresh the visuals, every visual generates a DAX query. For example, this is the slicer. The slicer is populated with a list of brands. How does Power BI get this list of brands? If I copy this query and I go back to DAX Studio and I paste the query here, you see that this query is a little bit longer, so let me just reduce the font a little bit. We have some DAX code that at the end, when I run this code, shows in the content, in the result, the list of the brands that has been used by Power BI to populate the slicer. Of course, we have to know DAX if we want to write this code, but the idea is that I don't need to have a full and deep knowledge of DAX if I just want to do a copy and paste, just to make sure I want to locate what is the result to transfer to the visual, because maybe I'm not convinced about the numbers I see. I want to see if the visual is doing something to change the content, for example. Usually we do this for performance analysis. However, the real reason why I want to copy and paste the code is usually different. It's usually because I want to move the code of the code from the visual here to do some analysis of the performance, but we will see this later. Performance analysis is something we will see later. Now I want to discuss about why should I use DAX Studio to write DAX code. So at the moment, let's focus only on, okay, I know some DAX, and if you use Power BI, you probably know some DAX. So if I just copy and paste a formula here, so let's say that I go here and I have margin, right? This is the measure margin I have here. If I copy and paste this code here, you see that I cannot run this code. This is not a code that I can run. This is an expression that I can format. You can use DAX Studio as an editor with the feature that integrates format query straight here. Now, this is a very simple expression. So let me show you another example, which is the following. Here we have another model with a lot of more content, more report. It's not important to look at the content here. I want to show you that this model has more measures, and what is more important is that these measures are longer and more complex. So for example, the calculation of the new customers is this long expression. Now imagine that for some reason I was not so good in writing the code nicely formatted, and I wrote the code this way. Or maybe you make changes to the code and at a certain point you see the code is no longer formatted well. So let me just remove the comments. This could be easier to understand. So I remove this, I remove this, I remove this, and I remove this. Okay, just the initial lines. Okay, so if I copy this code, Control-C copy, and Control-V paste, now I have this code here. As I said, I cannot run this code as it is now, but what I can do, I can format the query. And now that the query is nicely formatted, I can just copy the code and paste the code here. And now the code is nicely formatted again. So this is just an example of one of the reasons why we could use DAX Studio. For this specific action, I would suggest you to look at Tabular Editor. I think I have seen in December, Daniel will present Tabular Editor. Tabular Editor can do this with a single click. You don't have to do copy and paste, so it could be easier. But we did this for years, and today we could have another reason to use DAX Studio for that, which is the following. So here we have the ability to write DAX code, format DAX code, and you see we have other features that are common in an editor, like I can comment, I can uncomment the code, I can move here in the code. For example, I can go here and I can move this column, move this column here in this line, okay? You can obtain the same doing double click. You double click here and you put where you have a cursor, the name, in this case, the name of the column. I will not spend too much time. There are many features here that are common. We also have the ability to look for the name of a measure or the name of a column, if you prefer. So price, all the concepts are called price in all the tables, and so on. It's similar to what you have in Power BI. So these are the features we have. But sometimes when you write code, it could be useful to take a look at the content of the table. Now, we don't have a full preview of the content of the table, but what we have is a small peek of what we have in this column. If I go on this column, I can see that this column contains dates, and I see a few dates we have. Here we have just numbers. Here we have strings, and we see the first a sample of 10 addresses. Sometimes this is enough because a lot of times I have names that are very similar. One is a number, one is a string. I want to see some example of the content. This could be very helpful. I don't have to switch back and forth between two different environments to find what is the right content I want to use. Just another example of why we use this. So one practical example of when I want to use DAX Studio, so I can show you also another feature we have in DAX Studio, is the following. And I want, this way now I'm going to mix a few of the different features we have. I see that here we have a result. Let me, oops, sorry, I made some mistake now. What happened? Oh, because I made some mistake. Okay, let me open. Sorry, I don't remember what I changed. Now I have to call OP. I have to close and open this file again. What I want to show. Okay, I can do the same with this example. It's easier. So let's say that here we have a number. Come on. Here we have margin and sales amount displayed with this chart. And let's say that I realize that there is something wrong in this number. So the margin is a number that is not correct for some reason. So what can I do at this point? Well, I could try to edit the measure, change the measure, look at the result. Now the result here is shown as a bar chart, not as a table. So I don't see the number until I go here. So it could be time consuming to make the change and try everything every time. So what I can do is, for example, in this element here, we have a query generated for this element, which is, if you click on an element, you see that the element highlighted the corresponding visual, and this sales amount, no, this one, margin and sales amount by continent is what I want. I can copy the query here, and I can paste the query in my DAX Studio that is connected to Contoso, okay? Let me check, I run the query, and the query returns for each continent the margin and the sales amount. So far, so good. Now I see the number, I can realize, oh, this number is not good, for example, and I want to fix the number. Now, what you can do when you are using DAX Studio is the following. Let's say that the margin is the measure that is not working well, so margin is here. What I can do is I can right-click this measure, and I can include with define measure, I can include the definition of the measure for this measure within my DAX query. When you do that, the local definition of the measure overrides the definition that you have in Power BI. if I run the query now, I still see the same result, but I can show you that if I multiply by 10 the number of this expression, look at the numbers you see at the bottom here. Look at this, 17 million, 11 million. If I run this query again, now this is multiplied by 10. Of course, this is just to show you that my local definition now overrides the original one. However, when I have a measure that depends on other measures, because sales amount and total cost are other two measures, I may want to do, okay, I need also sales amount. Maybe that if I have a problem in a calculation, maybe the problem is caused by one of the measures that I'm using. So I can define a measure of sales amount. Or if I know that I want to examine margin and all the measures that can be referenced by margin in a direct or indirect way, I can right click here and do define dependent measures. If I click this, what we have are all the measures that are necessary to calculate margin. Now you see that margin has a direct reference to sales amount and total cost, but let me repeat this again with the margin percentage. You can see the margin percentage has only this division that has margin and sales amount. We are not referencing total cost here. If I do this one, I see margin, margin percentage, margin, sales amount, and total cost. Advantage of this approach, if now I change here, and I, for example, write, let's say that this is wrong, and I write here unit price, look at the numbers here will change. It's not a 17, it's 19 now, because I'm using another column. And maybe that now that I found the problem and I fixed the problem, I can copy and paste this code, fixing the code in Power BI. DAX Studio can only read something, can read metadata, can read data, cannot write on Power BI, on the model. This is something that you can do with Tabular Editor, not with DAX Studio. So in DAX Studio, it's just to test your environment. So it's safe for your model because we are not going to change anything in an intentional or unintentional way. So far we have seen that DAX Studio has the ability to write code, write DAX code, execute DAX code, look at the result of the DAX code, look at the list of the columns, the measures that we have in the model, take a look also at some statistics about the columns of the model. If you remember, when I select here a table, you see the number of columns of the table, but when I select a column, we see that this column has 3 unique values. This other column, education, has 6 unique values, and you see a few of the values that we have here. In this case, all the 6, but when you have something like the phone, you don't see all the phone numbers, you see only a few of the phone numbers. And this is the basic part of DAX Studio. Now, let's say that we want to write a query. Of course, you can learn DAX. We have a lot of articles on SQL BI, free courses, also more advanced courses if you want. But a new feature we have in DAX Studio is this. Wait a minute. We lost the one feature here. This one. It's in preview. For this reason, it is not visible. You see that here in the options, we have a number of additional features that are in preview, and let's enable all of them. You see that if I enable the preview feature, we have this button, Query Builder. Query Builder is, guess what, a query builder. So with a query builder, you can say, okay, I want to create a query where I group by, for example, continent and maybe year. Let's see, date, calendar year. I want to see the sales amount. So sales and sales amount. And I can run the query and I can see the result here. This is the result of the query. I can also edit the query. I can see the code generated to execute this query for me. Of course, you can say, well, but I want to filter a particular product class. I don't remember product classes, probably product brand is easier because I remember the brand. And here I could say, okay, the brand should be should start with Contoso. I run the query. You see that the numbers now are smaller, and if I edit the query, let me just cancel everything. If I edit the query, I have the definition of the query that implements exactly the condition that I asked. In this case, it has to start with Contoso. So it has to do a search. If I ask it equal to is Contoso, you will see that the condition is different. And so we try to create code that is relatively well optimized. If you use the latest version of DAX Studio, because the first version didn't generate good DAX code. You can also create a local version of the measures if you want. So if you want to change the definition of sales amount, so let's say that this is multiplied by 2, we can create a local version of sales amount that has a different definition. You see that now sales amount is defined here. I can also format the query if I prefer, and I can see the code nicely formatted with my multiplied by 2 here. Why should you use the query builder? Well, what we have here after evaluate is something that you could use, copy and paste in Power BI Desktop in a new table. Table here equal to, and I paste the code. So after evaluate, you have to pay attention if you have something in the define or variable first, but usually the code that you obtain after evaluate, you can copy and paste the code. And here we go. We have a calculated table defined as you want. This could be particularly interesting if you use paginated reports, because a paginated report has a single query that runs over your data source, and your data source could be your dataset that you publish on PowerBI.com. And the best way to retrieve data from this dataset is writing DAX code. Now, Power BI Report Builder has a small DAX editor to do that, but probably it's easier to use the one that is integrated in DAX Studio, especially if you are already comfortable with DAX Studio. So this is a relatively new feature. It's still in preview, but actually this version starts to be usable, even though there are probably many other features that we could add in the future, but it starts to be something that you can use. As you see, we have here other features that are useful also if you don't have a particular knowledge of DAX. For example, View Metrics. View Metrics opens a new pane here and shows you the data of the distribution of the data of the memory in your data model. For example, this model Contoso that I'm using has 300 megabytes in memory. This is the size in memory. It could be larger than the PBIX file, because once it is in memory, there is some part of the file that is expanded in memory, especially the dictionaries, and this could require more memory. So, okay, this is interesting, but what is more interesting is looking at how this memory is used. For example, here, the sales table has a consumption of 312 megabytes. It's very big compared to the other tables we see. And if I open here the sales table, I can see the cost of each column. Because Power BI or Tabular in general loads the data in memory in a compressed way, column by column, the cost could be different for each column of your model. And you can see here that the cost for this column called online sales key is 1/3, more or less, of the entire table, almost of the entire model. Same for order number. And order line number is smaller, but still a large number. Now, if you don't have the requirement to show the order number and the order line number in your reports in Power BI, you can remove these two columns, order number and order line number, but we could also remove online sales key. Once again, we cannot remove the columns from DAX Studio, but DAX Studio can help us locating these columns. So I can go to DAX Studio and I can say, oh, you know what? I want to remove online sales key, delete. I want to remove Okay. I want to remove the order number. Where is the order number? Here we go. And the order line number. I can remove both. So delete this and delete this. Now, after I removed the information here, what happens? Well, DAX Studio automatically recognizes that there was some change in the metadata. So here, if I go on sales, the order number disappeared. So the metadata is refreshed automatically unless you disable this in the settings. The settings have many options. You could decide to disable that, because if you are connected remotely to analysis services and the database is very large, the latency could slow down DAX Studio just to refresh the metadata. But usually when you work locally, it's not a problem. But this pane has not been refreshed. And the reason is that it could be too expensive to run all the queries we run to populate this window every time there is a small change. So if you click on View Matrix again, you see that now my model is only 100 megabytes, and here I see that the cost of each column is always the same, but I don't have other columns. So the cost of this table now is only 100 megabytes. I saved 60% of the model in memory, removing 3 columns. Of course, I can do that if I don't need those columns, but a lot of times you import data that you don't really need for your reports, and this is an easy way to find what you could try to remove to save memory. These information are useful for many other reasons. For example, here we have another visualization with a list of the columns, the list of the relationships. For each relationship, we have other information about the cardinality and if there are invalid keys on the many side. We also have information about partitions, not useful for Power BI, but useful for analysis services. This information is just statistics about the tables and the columns. You can export this information on an external file. We call this a VPAX file. This VPAX file can be used in VertiPack Analyzer, which is another tool that provides you more details about the content. But a good thing is, let me just save cdev demo contoso contoso.vpax file. Okay, so if I save this file, I just want to show you that this file is very small. This file is very small. It's only 40 kilobytes compared to the 240 megabytes of the entire PBX file, which means that it is easy to copy. It is easy to send to someone else by email, and this file doesn't contain any data, just the definition of the model and the statistics about the model. If you have to provide assistance to someone who works on a Power BI model locally on another machine, you don't have, or you cannot have, direct access to the data, as a consultant, I always ask, give me the VPAX file of your model, because this helps me understanding what is in the model, what is the size of the columns of the tables, the relationship, everything. And this is very helpful to do remote assistance. How can you open the file, the VPAX file, with VertiPack Analyzer, another tool that you can download from sqlbi.com, or by clicking here, Import Matrix. With Import Matrix, I show you, if I open a new instance of DAX Studio without any connection, so I'm opening a new window here. I don't have any connection here. I cancel, I don't have any connection, but I can import the VPAX file. So imagine I can send this 40 kilobyte file by email, and now I have all the details here, and I can see them locally, and I didn't copy any sensitive data that I had in my model. And this is another feature that is we call this the integration of VertiPack with VertiPack Analyzer with DAX Studio, because VertiPack Analyzer is a small tool that you can download, but it's also a library that you can integrate in your tools. So if for any reason you're interested in importing this VPAX file in a tool that you want to build, there is a library you can integrate in your tool if you want. So it's open source, public, free, no problems. Another feature is export data. We really implemented this because people requested the feature, and let me explain you why. If you want to push data into Power BI, easy. If you want to get data out from Power BI, not so easy. there are a lot of restrictions also for security reasons to stop people to get data out of Power BI, which is good when you have a report published on the web, because probably you want to put, you want to stop people to extract too many details from the data. But when you're working locally and you basically have access to the raw data if you want, you might have many reasons why you want to export this table or this content into an Excel file for some reason. So here I could copy, I don't remember, I think if I do this, I can copy this into the clipboard and I can paste the code. But when the table is large, it's not really an easy task, and it could be slow. It could be very slow. When you have a lot of rows, a lot of columns, it could be slow. So there are two ways to solve this problem. One is you can choose to generate the output into an Excel file. So when I run a query, so let me run here, evaluate product, okay? There are not so many products, but we have 1,000 rows of 1,000 something rows. Oh, sorry, 2,500 rows here. So I could say I want to copy the result of this query into an Excel file. So I run, I'm asked to save this file. So products, and this file has been saved in the directory demo. Let me show you the demo directory. Where is the demo directory? The demo folder. Okay, I have to open this one. Give me a second. I have another monitor, so I move the window here. And now here I have my products file that I exported. I can open it, and here we go. We have our table exported here. Not our table, we exported the result of a query. This query was simple, was just give me exactly these the content of the entire table, but I could use the query builder and create a query that has only a few columns, a few rows with the filters, for example. So this is a customization of that. And another interesting feature is that you can create this as a linked table. Let me show you what does it mean. I run the query again. And I have to close this one. This is a new feature. I'm not sure this. Let me save currency so we make sure that we save something. Run. Here we go. Okay, so let me check whether the file has been created correctly or not. Oh, wait a minute. I have another window here. Now, probably this is not, I didn't configure this correctly. So I have to, okay. See demo. No, sorry, it's not working well. Probably I didn't install here a driver, because what happens here, it creates another file that should be open with Excel, but there is no, we don't have the right driver to do that. I'm using a machine for the demo, but basically this creates a connection to have a table in Excel that has the DAX query connected to an external source so that you can refresh the query in Excel without going through DAX Studio. So what about the export data? The export data allows you to export not just one table, but many tables. And you can say, okay, I want to write in demo as CSV, I want to export currency and product and date, for example. And there are other flags here, but as you have seen, you could also decide to write this data on SQL Server, creating one table for each table you have in Power BI. Don't ask me why people love this feature, because I would have never asked for this feature, but actually we know several people who export millions of rows this way, because probably they are not able, they have the connector for Power BI, but they don't have the connector for SQL Server to extract data from some service, some web service. I'm not sure about why they did this, but as you see here, now we have currency CSV, date CSV, and product CSV. So if I open currency CSV, again, I'm opening it in Excel, but the file is a text file that has the data. You have seen that before as an Excel file, it was formatted in a proper way. So what else we have? This is just another, this is the external tool, I can open the profiler or I can open Excel connected to the same connection of DAX Studio, but I would say this is less interesting. Another feature we have in DAX Studio is the ability to analyze the performance. So far I tried to show you. I can use DAX Studio to run DAX queries. I can write DAX queries. I can test a measure in a DAX query. I can write DAX code. I can format DAX code. I can generate the code of a query. I can export the result of a query. I can export the content of a table. I can analyze the metadata, the statistics about the model. Now, the last area that I want to analyze is the performance area. Now, we have in Power BI features to analyze the performance. For example, here, if I open the performance analyzer, so if I go in View, Performance Analyzer, I have this pane. When I start the recording, what happens? Every action you apply to the report, like for example, I select a brand, you see that here we have like a log. Action, what happened? We refreshed the 4 visuals. Now I click another brand, another action, other visuals. And each of these visuals has some internal action. In this case, we don't have a query, but this is a query. Selecting a brand in the slicer updated the content of other visuals generating DAX code. And we already have seen that I can copy the query back and forth on DAX Studio. But as you see, I'm running several queries this way. And the ability to sort these queries here is limited by, for example, the actions that we applied. You see that the sort order that I applied now is always local to the action that we executed, okay? But this is because the visualization of Performance Analyzer has this limitation. In reality, you can export here, using this button, you can export the content of this analysis that you applied. Now let me save this in my demo folder. I use the default name, and I don't know why it is asking me twice. Yes. Okay. So what happens? So the file that I saved now is a JSON file. If I show you the content of this file, it's something that is not really easy to read. Okay, this is the content of the JSON file. It's just a text file. However, DAX Studio has a feature to read that file. If I click on Load Performance Data, Load Perf Data, I can open my JSON file here. Again, I increase the font a little bit. And you see that here I have the same information that we have seen in Power BI, with one big difference. Now, I don't have the restriction of the actions. Actually, I don't have the actions at all. I just have the log of the visual that have been refreshed, and I only have the information about the rendering time and the query execution time. This query in milliseconds correspond to the DAX execution time. And here we have also the DAX query. So if I go here and I say, okay, first of all, I can sort this data by query millisecond. Now you see that even though I executed these 2 slicers in 2 different actions, now they are at the beginning of my list because they have the largest amount of milliseconds. Now we are looking at very small numbers, but sometimes this is hundreds of milliseconds or seconds. And if you trace the log for a while, you might be able to recognize which are the more common, more frequent queries that are expensive, even though they have been executed in different places. So this could be useful, right? Because it's just another visualization. And if you want to see the query, you just double click here and you have the query here. And this query has also in the comments additional information that are not reported in the log that you see in Power BI Desktop. So is a tool to just analyze the log file generated by Performance Analyzer. And of course, as usual, this is a DAX query, so I can just click run, and I can see the result here. Here we go. Now it is not okay. DAX Studio is not perfect. So when it happens that you see that something is not running well, you see that in this situation I have a query that is running for too much time, and I think it failed, it expired. I don't know. Let me try again. No, now it. Oh, right, because I forgot this. I forgot that the output is persisted across every execution. So now I want to revert to output to grid because I don't want to save this into an external file. So now probably, okay. And I can click run again. Now it works. Sorry, I forgot that So here I have the result of the execution. Now, what about deeper analysis? So this is usually useful to have access to information that are not really visible from the Performance Analyzer in Power BI Desktop. Now, before looking at the query plan and server timings, I want to show you this other feature, all queries. All queries is another pane here that shows all the queries that run on a server. In this case, it's my Power BI Desktop file, so there is only one user. But when you are connected to analysis services, you can see all the queries sent by any user. So be careful, because if you are connected to a production server, there could be a lot of information here, and you could slow down the server just because you enabled this. But why this could be useful? Well, for example, because I am not able to capture the query. Let me show you two reasons for that. First, if I refresh this page, no, sorry, I don't want to do this. Sorry, I made a mistake. I didn't want to do this. Let's not refresh the page. If I click on a brand, then on another brand, then on another brand, every time I do this action, there are new queries running. And if I go back to DAX Studio, you see here the queries that have been run by my user here. You see the username that could be different for different users. And you can say, well, but I don't understand. I mean, I have Performance Analyzer. Indeed, the Performance Analyzer made this feature less useful. But there is one thing that you might want to do, which is the following. If I go back to Contoso here, now I'm using another external tool, and I'm connecting Excel to this Power BI model just to test my query. This is a simulation of analyzing Excel when analyzing Excel runs on connected to a dataset that you have on powerbi.com. Now, if I include here my measures and maybe some city here, you see that in order to populate this pivot table, I executed a query that I cannot see with the Performance Analyzer, because Performance Analyzer is not present in Excel. But I was able to intercept these queries here. You see MDX, MDX, MDX. This is the MDX query generated by Excel. And if I run the query here, I can see the result returned to Excel. The shape is different, but this is just to show you that I can intercept DAX queries and MDX queries, and I can also run MDX queries as long as the data model is a tabular model like Power BI Desktop. At this point, I have different tools to capture a query I want to analyze. I can introduce you to the tools to analyze the query, which are query plan and server timings. Pay attention, when you click on query plan, you have to wait 1, 2, 3 seconds before you see this button ready. At that point, you can also click on server timings. You might want to use only one, and now I want to show you both, so I clicked on both. I just want to show you what happens when I run this query again. You see that the query has been executed in a few milliseconds, but now we have in the query plan, we don't have anything. Oh, right, because yes, sorry. Let me clear the cache. I will explain you this. No, this will be too long to explain, but okay. So this is running to my. When you see something that runs so long, maybe it's time to close DAX Studio and run it again. It happens. So let me just close this. Oh, I want to save the DAX, the MDX code first. So I can close DAX Studio here. I can go back to external tools and open DAX Studio again. I run the query plan and I run the server timings. You can also see here in the output log of the operation that are displayed here. Query trace started means that I can actually, I'm actually listening to the profiler events to see what happens here. When I run this query, this is an MDX query, by the way, I can see in the query plan information about what is the query plan for executing this query. You can see that these are the logical query plan, the physical query plan. We have articles, books explaining, and also white paper on our website explaining in details the content of these query plans. But in reality, what we use more often is this visualization, server timings, which shows the time, the execution time, the overall execution time, and how it has been split between storage engine and formula engine. And here we have a list of the storage engine queries that have been executed. So depending on the complexity of the query, you can see here more details about what is going wrong in execution, and you can modify the DAX expression that you identify as responsible for slow performance. Discussing this is a very long topic. We already have, as I said, articles, videos about this. But the idea is that I will use query plan and server timings to analyze one query at a time. So the idea when you want to do these analysis, you use load performance data and or all queries to look at multiple events, multiple queries. You can sort them, you can look at them, as a group. But then when you want to analyze the query plan, you have to select one query only, and you have to run the query activating one or both of these tools. And at that point, you can investigate like you could do in a SQL Server. Just looking at the query plan doesn't tell you exactly what you have to change in the database. The big difference is that usually, while in SQL Server, the optimization could be obtained by creating indexes or by optimizing statistics, the only thing you can do in a model is to change your DAX expressions or sometimes change the data model, but you don't have something like an index just to improve the performance of your model. I think we pretty much covered almost everything. One last thing, maybe because we are in Europe, we have this feature, swap delimiters, which, let me get some DAX code because this is not a good idea. So let's open performance data and let's double click here. So you see this is DAX code. If I click on this button, the comma becomes a semicolon or vice versa. This feature does not completely produce good code in all the conditions, but this feature is still useful if you have power pivot and you have a localized version of if you have international settings that don't use the comma as a list separator and dot as a decimal separator. So if you live in a country, for example, in Italy, we have the dot as a decimal, the comma as a decimal separator and semicolon as a list separator. So by swap delimiters, we switch these delimiters, but this feature is not totally reliable. So we don't have a full parser, and this is not working too well. If you have Power BI Desktop, please use the default setting that now are English when you write DAX code. Of course, your Power BI environment will be still localized. But when you edit DAX code, you edit DAX code in its native format. Because also Power BI, when it showed the semicolon as a list separator, if you have this international setting, was not storing the formula in this format, was doing the conversion between the user interface and the storage. And this could be the source of some bug. So my suggestion is you don't have many reasons to use this, just use this. And so today, I don't think this is very useful in DAX Studio, as long as you use the regular default setting that in Power BI Desktop. Don't change the list separator when you edit DAX code. That's a thing. I think we pretty much covered everything. So I don't see the Teams window here. Okay. Do we have some questions?
Hi, Marco. Thank you very much for your session. It was very useful, and I think we also saw some new things that we didn't see before. We received a few questions.
Yes.
So let's start. So the first question is about the DAX formatting.
Yes.
Can we expect at some time a function that will format all DAX code in the report at once, or better, allows you to select, maybe even select particular measures and then press one button to auto format them all?
Today, you can do this in Tabular Editor, but I suggest you to not use Tabular Editor now, unless, I mean, there is, okay, Tabular Editor, Daniel will explain you how to do that in his session. There is the ability to create a macro that iterates measure by measure and format measure by measure. But the code we had today in Tabular Editor to do that is not particularly efficient because it does this measure by measure. It could be very slow because it has to call a web service for every measure. So what I'm working on is a new API to get the bulk of measures and do a format in a single step. And I cannot tell you more, but by Christmas we will have a surprise for this. So
it's going to be a good Christmas then.
So the goal is by Christmas we have to deliver a gift, a small gift. We'll see. Hopefully. Okay.
So Marco will be Santa.
Yeah. Hopefully.
All right. A second question is it possible to show unused measures? So a way to identify which measures are not used. This was a question by Agate.
Okay. So there's a good question because I can show you some other feature, not feature, but here in the metadata pane, you see we have the list of the table names, but we have the list of the functions in DAX and the list of the data management views. Data management views are SQL queries that actually ask for internal information of the engine. And one of these queries is this, discover calc dependency. That now I hope they fixed the bug that they had. But so if I go in the results here, you see that this list has a list of the dependencies that exist from a data model perspective. Okay, but from a data model perspective, which means that I can see that, let's go here, we have a measure here. So the measure total cost here, which has this expression, is referencing these objects. So we can, by analyzing this code, we can say whether a particular column is used or not in a measure, in a relationship, in a calculated column, in a calculated table, and so on. Okay, this is the idea. So this is the basis to do this analysis. I know that there are tools that use this view to create something like a dependency tree, and there are also tools that go further and analyze the content of the report to analyze these dependencies. Now, my point of view on this is that you have to be very careful, because this information is relatively reliable. But once you publish the model on Power BI, or you publish on analysis services, nobody can guarantee you that someone else in some other report creates a report using something that you don't identify here as something used, or create a measure using something that is not identified as something used. And when we have the composite models with the ability to connect to an external model, right? You know, this is a feature that Microsoft already announced. There is a preview that should start very, very soon, with the ability to, no, sorry, that's another preview. So, but they initially announced by November, then probably December, we should have this ability to create a model that is connected to an external model, but in the local model, I can add like a table or a relationship or a calculated column to an external model. When you go there, the ability to do this analysis across all the composite models, depending on your model, doesn't exist. So my suggestion is, if you want to understand within a data model what the dependencies are, you can use this view. But if you want to analyze whether a particular measure or a particular column is used in reports that you deployed, there is nothing today that is fully reliable, and it is going worse. So the only thing that could be reliable at a certain point is Microsoft analyzing all the reports in a tenant, looking for all the dependencies. And this is something that you cannot do. So for this reason, I'm saying be careful, because yes, we have some tools that work today, but the scope of what you can do with these tools is limited, in my opinion. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much for the answer. And now we have a final question. It was about the feature you showed by exporting to Excel, the output function.
Yes.
The question is this an extra option which should be enabled via options? Like, do you need to tick somewhere to enable this feature, or is it?
No, I don't think so. You just have to install the latest version of Power BI. Because, yeah, this is, yeah, key binary is another. No, this is not. Let me check, because I don't remember all the. History, custom export format. No, is enabled by default. If you have the latest version, the 2.13.1, it should be there. If you don't see these two buttons, you have an old version of DAX Studio probably.
Yeah. Okay. Then thank you.
Okay.
This was it for tonight. Marco, thank you very much for your valuable time. So we will have another session about Power BI external tools in 2 weeks' time. Then we will have Christian Wade, all the way from the other side of the world, from America, and he will do a demo of ALM Toolkit, and that will take about half an hour. And after that, there is the opportunity to ask questions about ALM Toolkit, the demo, but also any other questions. And I would really strongly advise everyone to think about the next coming 2 weeks. What do I want to ask Christian Wade? Because he's the program manager of the analysis services team and the Power and all the enterprise modeling features of Power BI. So yeah, if you have any questions, this is your chance to fire them to Christian, and that will be in 2 weeks' time, and it will be on the 19th of November, and we'll also start at 8 o'clock. So for now, thank you everyone for your attention, and have a good evening. See you next time.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.